Get us going here on today's Revit session. So, Revit families and families in Revit is a big topic. So we're going to break this into two sessions. So the first session is going to be kind of an introduction and then some basics. And then the second session, I'm going to go into more of like 3D modeling and parameters, shared parameters, and get into depth with some of the more advanced features. But today's session will be good just to kind of give you a brief overview, and then the Revit demo portion of it is going to be maybe taking one of our existing maybe furniture families or something like that and editing it in different ways to get what you guys need or whatever you need for your particular project. But basic general overview, what is a Revit family? How should we be loading our LBA families? And then modifying the Revit family. So what is a Revit family? Well, everything in Revit is kind of a family. It's either a system, and it's broken down into a hierarchy where you have categories, and then you actually have model categories, and you have annotation categories. And I don't want to read this verbatim, so you can read it later. And then it breaks down underneath that, where under a model category, you might have a system family and you might have component family. So when I say families, most people think of component families, the stuff that gets loaded into the project. But I just want you to be aware of that when you actually go to Revit and you open up the families portion over here in the project browser, you'll see that there's walls that are all part of that are in and created within the project. They are a family, and it could be a basic wall, it could be a storefront system or anything like that, but it is considered a system family that is created and lives in the project. In our case, it lives in the template. And then, of course, within the families, you also have the annotation symbols, which is their own kind of world of a different type of family. You'll have detail components, which are also their own types of families. And in the next session, when we create a new family, you'll see that there's this long list of just family templates that you start with that creates these particular families. So you got to think, have a little foresight beforehand. Okay, what is it that I need? Is it modeled? Is it annotation? And then, of course, or is it 2D? Could it be a 2D detail? Is it just a 2D representation of something that we need for construction documents because we don't need it rendered? And that's the other question you have to ask. Does it need to be rendered? And not that we're going to render it in Revit, but sometimes we might bring this Revit model into Inkscape or Lumion via live sync in front of a client, and they might go, "Where's all the furniture? Where's all the chairs?" Or, and then you might need some 3D content. But largely for construction document purposes, we try to use as much 2D as we can. That way it keeps the file sizes lower and everything. So let me go back to my little training sheet cut out. And then, of course, there's also in-place families. In-place families within the project that are really project-specific. You can copy-paste them from project to project, but it's not really. They're really not parametric. They're just something like you might have a unique lobby reception desk or something like that you might model in place at that. For that particular project that's unique to that project because maybe the space dictates that, and therefore you don't want to go into the family environment just to model up this reception desk that you're only going to use once. So you can potentially model it in place in an in-place family.
Is that the in-place component?
Yeah, in-place component is an in-place family is what it is. Yeah. So all right, so how should we be loading our families? Well, remember, we have container files, and the first thing that we should be loading families is going to that container file, grabbing the family content that you need, and bringing that into your project. And then, if it's not in that container file, like we didn't have this, my first recommendation is, okay, does Revit have it in what's called out of the box content? or OOTB, is you'll see the acronym used all over the internet. And that's basically the out-of-box content that's loaded when Revit gets loaded onto your machine. And it should be on your, and let's see if this computer has it. That's one thing I didn't check prior to coming down here. So let's open up this, and let's go to our C drive, and under program data, under Autodesk, and then under Revit 2019 tablets, libraries, sorry, and then US Imperial. And then in here is a whole slew of families that comes loaded when Revit is loaded on your machine. So it could be something, as simple and generic as a little in table or something like that. But if our container files don't have it, look in the out-of-box content. And then if you can't find it there, or you can't find something that you want, maybe approach one of your design team members or one of the BIM members, and we'll see if we can find you something. Sometimes we have something that was unique to a project, and oh yeah, we do have something similar to that, and we can grab it for you. And then lastly would be, editing an existing family to get what you need, 2D or 3D, and then saving that edited family back to the project families folder, which is in your project, and that's where I show this little snippet. So modifying existing Revit families. All right, so how do you create a new family type within the project? That's kind of your first your first thing that you would go through. Keep in mind that when you're in the project environment and you have let's say one of our furniture families in here, and let's say it's a table, 4 chairs, something along like that. Let's see, where's our table with 4 chairs? Let's open this guy up. Let's drag him in here. Let's place him. And you say, okay, I need this table to be bigger. And the first thing you do is, okay, let's click on this. Let's see what options we have within this family. There's 2 different types of parameters that get created with families, and that's instance parameters and type parameters. Type parameters are unique to this individual family that's placed within the project, and then type parameters is global. So if you need it to happen to every one of your tables, you would edit the type, not necessarily the instance. So this particular family actually has visibility parameters assigned to each one of the chairs. So I could turn off chairs 1 and 3, and it's an instance parameter, and you see it just turned off the 2 chairs that are relative to that particular table and not the entire family. But if I go into this family and I edit the type, it's got 2 parameters built into it, width and length. And if I change that to be a, let's say our length is going to be a 6-foot table, 6 feet, and we say okay, you'll notice that it changed both tables because that was a type parameter that was assigned to it, and it updates globally to that family throughout the project. So keep in mind, instance parameter is unique to the single instance that's placed. Type parameter is parameters that is for global changes to your table. And the point being is oh, I needed a bigger table. Well, I could come into this existing family and create a bigger table with 4 chairs, and I'm off and running. Didn't have to go into the family editor, family environment, any of that. So keep that in mind, that you have the ability to change those things within the family as long as the parameters are built into it. Now, if the parameters aren't built into it and you need something like visibility, so let's take this table with 2 chairs. I'm going to click on it, and you'll notice that it doesn't have the chair 1, chair 2 visibility parameter assigned to it. And let's say, oh, well, I need this one, and I just need it to have 1 chair. Well, you have a couple of things that you could do. When you click on it, you can edit family, which is right up here at the top. You can also come down here, and this is where the common mistake is. People try to right-click on the type that's underneath here, and when I right-click, I go, oh, I can't edit it. But watch what happens when I right-click on the actual name of the family. There's my edit function. So you can edit from here, or you can edit at the top once you select an object, and you can say edit family. The second that you do that, it goes into the family editor environment, which is a little bit different. It's got some, the tabs up at the top are a little bit different, and then it's got more of the modeling type tools that are built into Revit for you to utilize. What might be a little shocking is when you open that particular one, you're like, what the heck is going on? I see a line, and where the heck am I? Well, by default, these open in a 3D view, and this is a unique 2D family that we created for construction documents. So you need to go to the plan view or the view that you want to edit, because some of the 2D families that we have might actually have different views. We make them like the old smart CAD blocks where you can see this elevation, you can see this elevation, and you can see the plan. But when you go to 3D, it looks like the old SketchUp tree that's got this, this weird, it just looks, and I'll show you that here momentarily with the toilet. But here's that same family. And what you're going to notice when you get into the family editor, that there are reference planes. There's usually sometimes nested families in there. So this is a chair that's nested into this particular family. And then there's lines that represent the 2D table. And it can do the same thing, but you have to realize that the family types, so right now I don't have a family types up in my properties, and where it lives is up here in the properties, this little 4 square family types icon up here. And if you click on that, this is where your family types dialog box pops up, and it's similar to the family types that's within your project. And it'll have the parameters that are listed in this particular family. Okay, well, what did I notice? Well, guess what? Here's chair 1 and chair 2. There are visibility parameters for this particular family. They're just not instance parameters. They were type parameters. So if I cancel, I go back to my project, and if I click on this, and maybe I should have done this before I started editing it, if I go to my type parameters here, edit type, I would notice, oh, there's my chair 1, chair 2. Well, remember what we said. We had a unique situation where we need one of these chairs turned off. And if I have 50 of these placed in my model, and I go in here and edit this type to be, oh, I just want chair 2 turned off, it's going to do it globally, and I don't want that. So, okay, what do? I need to change that parameter from a type parameter to an instance parameter. I'm going to show you how to do that right now. So I'm going to go back to my family environment. I'm going to go, or family editor, I'm going to go to my type, family types, and I'm going to click on the first chair 2 parameter. And down here at the bottom with the pencil is the edit parameter. I'm going to click on that. And then here's where you have the option to change it from type to instance. I'm going to say OK. You'll notice that it switches to a default, and it'll say default. Anytime you see default in parentheses, that's your, in the family editor, that's your telltale sign that that's an instance parameter, not a type parameter. So chair 1, still a type. Chair 2, instance. So I'm going to change chair 2. I'm going to edit the type. I'm going to change it to instance. I'm going to say OK, and then OK. All right, now I'm going to load this in. There's 2 different types of load into project. There's load into project by itself, which leaves this file open. And then there's load into project and close. If you're done editing this family, I just say load into project and close. And then this is where people get confused, or sometimes it can be confusing, because the first thing it'll ask you is, do you want to save this table? And you're going to say no, because 1, you won't have the ability to save it over the table on the S drive. Only the MEM committee has the ability to do that. But just in case something wacky happens and you do end up accidentally saving it, it's not overriding our family globally for the entire firm. The other option is if you do say yes, it might give you a dialog pop-up that says where do you want to save it. Then you can particularly save it in your project under the project families. But most cases, just say no. It's going to remember your settings within the project, and it'll ask you, do you want to overwrite the existing version, or do you want to overwrite the existing version and its parameters? for this case, I want to overwrite the parameters as well because I wanted to update those two instance visibility parameters. So I'm going to say update and then say, oh, you don't have editable. Say yes, you want to make it editable. Now, when it came in, both of them were turned, both chairs popped back on. The reason why is because inside that family editor, when it changed it to an instance parameter, I had it checked on. If I would have checked it off, it would have loaded it with that by default turned off. But I want them both on because I want everybody to see that there's two chairs. And now when I click on this family, you'll notice over in the instance parameter, I can now turn off chair 2, and it only turns it off for that particular table. So that's the first thing you got to keep in mind is look at the parameters of the family. It could be instance parameters, could be type parameters. When you click on it, check over here into your properties dialog box, see if there's anything unique over here. And there are quite a bit of stuff like our cabinets and stuff like that have unique stuff that you can turn on and off for visibility purposes. So keep that in mind. You still have the ability to now make this table bigger, smaller, or whatever. Now, let's take it a step further. Because this chair is a nested chair within this family, let's say you wanted to make that chair editable under this type. Let's say you wanted a parameter inside this family where it's like, hey, I want this chair to be, instead of 18 inches, I want it to be 2 feet wide or something like that. We're going to make a bariatric chair here that we can put on this table. All right, so to do that, you need to go back to the family editor, open up this particular family, go back to your view. We should have probably left it open, sorry. And now, if you click on this chair, you'll notice that I have the just like in a project environment, I have the ability to have the type of what this chair is, the width, the depth, the arm width. Those are the 3 parameters that are built into this particular chair. Okay, what I can do is, and I'm going to just do a mental note, we'll call it chair width, chair depth, and arm width. Okay, so what I'm going to do is back into my family types, and that's where it gets confusing. I got to go into here. I need to create a parameter within this family that talks to the chair family and tells the chair family, hey, I want this to be 24 inches. So you have to create a parameter, and down at the bottom you'll have, there's the edit parameter, new parameter, and delete parameter. We're going to create a new parameter, all right? It's going to be a length parameter, and it's going to be a type. We're going to make it a type, and we're going to call it chair width. And we'll just go with width for right now. And we're going to say, okay. Then we have chair width, and we're going to say, we're going to make that chair width, we're going to say 24 inches. And say, okay. Now, we have the parameter built. Now we got to assign it to that chair. So we're going to click on the chair. We're going to edit the type of the chair. And, okay, how do I assign it? Well, here's my width. And what you'll notice is over here at the very end, there's this little box, and it says Associate Family Parameter. Associate Family Parameter. When you click on that, it then gives us the parameters that are available within this particular project. Now I can give it the chair width, say OK, and it now grays out my chair width functionality within here, and it gives it the 2 feet. And I say OK. All right, so now I can go back to the family parameter that I created for this, and we said we wanted to be a bariatric chair, so I'm going to make this, 3'6", and we're going to say apply, and you'll notice that it made both chairs 3'6" wide. Okay, now I'm going to say okay. I'm going to load this into the project. It's going to ask me, do you want to overwrite the version or do you want to overwrite it with parameters? I'm going to say overwrite with the parameters. It should make my bariatric chair that's on my table. And now when I click on this, I can go into my type and I could say, oh, I need that chair now to be 18 inches. Did I use inches? No, I don't have my glasses on. And say okay, and it makes my chair nice and small. So now I'm manipulating the type parameters within the chair, but I had to create a type parameter within my table family that talks to that parameter so it can communicate and allow you to have the flexibility to do that. Any questions so far?
Now, if you're looking at the left-hand side in the families and you just right-click and duplicate it, does that keep it exactly the same, or does it make it a whole new entity so when you change that one, it's not going to change all the other ones?
So are you saying right click,
Yeah, so if you're actually
duplicate
like that
the
chair,
type?
just duplicate, yeah, that one at the top. So it says duplicate. Sorry, click on there.
Okay, so here's the type,
Yes.
here's the family.
Click
If you right click on the family, you can't duplicate it.
Right, so it's the type.
Correct. So if you right click on the type, you can duplicate the type, okay? That's the same thing as going to this family, going edit type, and hitting duplicate.
Exactly the same.
It's
Okay.
exactly the same
I wasn't
thing.
Sure, and I
Yeah.
just wanted to
It's two different ways to do the same thing. Here's the other thing is once I do that, the other thing I can do is I can go in here and go type properties, and it brings up the same dialog box as me clicking on this guy and hitting edit type properties. It's the same thing. It's just two different ways to do the exact same task. So, okay, let's go to, and I'm just going to file new project and browse. I'm going to open up our container file, and I'm going to show you the toilet, which is a 2D family, but it's kind of multi-dimensional, meaning I can look at it in an elevation, different elevations, and see. You'll see that when you're in 3D, it looks like that wireframe kind of element. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to edit this guy. Actually, right now I'm just going to control copy. I'm going to go back to my plan here, and I'm going to say control paste, and I'm going to paste him. And what you'll notice is this particular family has the clearance built into it. All right. This particular clearance is an instance parameter, and you'll notice that it is a 56 depth by 60 inch wide clearance. If I turn off the clearance, it turns off that graphic. If I turn on the clearance, it turns the graphic back on, but I also have the ability to switch it from a 66 depth, or when I click that toggle, it turns off the other toggle and makes this the 66 inch depth by 60 inch wide. And that's for your purpose of ADA clearances and everything. The other thing that's built into this family is that toilet is exactly 18 inches away from that edge, which happens to be the ADA clearance of a toilet off the wall. So some of these parameters are built into our families. Keep that in mind. All right. So, but for our cases, we don't necessarily want the clearance on because we have it placed in the right spot, and we're good to go, and everything's all fine and dandy. All right. So let's say I have a wall, and let's create a wall, and I want this guy to be 18 inches away from the wall. I can do an align lock or align to that element. Now it's 18 inches off the wall. Now I can turn this guy off. I don't need him on anymore because we've placed him, he's in the right spot. And now I'm dimensioning, and I go in here and, oh man, I want to dimension to the center line of that toilet. Why can't I dimension to the center line of the toilet? Well, let's investigate that. Let's click on that toilet. Let's go to the edit family environment. Here's our 2D dimension. We're not seeing the plan view, but it's there, as you know, because we just saw it. And you'll notice, well, wait a second, I have a reference plane here. Why can't I dimension to that reference plane? Because we've all seen families where we can kind of hover and tab and dimension to some of that. Well, it's all based on what this reference plane is defined as. And over on the other in the properties of that reference planes, you'll see there's an is reference parameter that's associated to all reference planes, and you'll notice that it's categorized as not a reference. Okay, when you drop this down, you'll have several different options that you can choose from. You have, obviously, it can be the center, right, and left. It can be the right or the left. I wouldn't recommend that because it's really not the right. Maybe it is the center, right, and left. Oh, it is the center, right, and left. But for our purposes, we're going to use weak reference or strong reference. We're going to define it as that, and we're going to reload it back into our project. Training, open. We're just going to overwrite the existing version. We didn't really change any parameters. Now, when I dimension from face of, I have the center line of that toilet that I can now dimension to. So that's another option that you got to keep in mind. What's the question?
Is there a reason why it's off?
It's off because I discovered by accident it was off. Because if you go to our other toilets, it's on. But I specifically brought that up because I was like, okay, this is a good point. If people do see that, if it's in your project, I can't change it. I can change it in the template now, but I can't change it if it's already in your project. Now you know how to go from your project and edit and turn that back on.
There's really no benefit to it being off.
Correct. It should have been on, and it was, for some reason, it was made not a reference, but it should have been on. So, once again, back to our family environment. Once again, this is a toilet that has 2D representation. Why couldn't we see the plan view, and why could we see the two vertical views? So, the reason why is within a family you have actual model lines and symbolic lines. And symbolic lines are annotative lines. They only show on that particular view. You won't see them in a 3D view. Model lines you will see in a 3D view. So this particular family is actually made with model lines and symbolic lines. And my preference would be they should all probably be model lines. And I know why. Sometimes model lines can get covered over by masking regions, and then you can't see them. So there are times where you actually need symbolic lines, and let me show you a case in point on that one. Here's a wall-mounted toilet. We're going to edit it. And when we go to the plan view here, there's our masking region. Why do we need a masking region? Well, if you place a toilet, you don't want to see the tile pattern underneath the toilet, right? So you need a masking region within your family to mask that. And same goes with the side views. If you have tile on your wall and you don't want to see beyond that toilet, you need a masking region that represents that. The problem is the masking region will mask over the model lines. And so you have to come back and place symbolic lines over the top that's in the same spot. So that's why you'll see symbolic and model lines within a family.
So you need model lines so you can see it in 3D. You need symbolic lines so you can see it through the masking region.
Correct.
You need the masking region so you don't see stuff beyond.
Correct.
Okay.
This has all been my experience. I mean, over the years of me doing this, I sit there and pound my head on the walls as to why this family isn't working the way it is, and why is this masking region covering this up. And what I've discovered is, okay, all right, I need symbolic lines here. Okay, well, if I have symbolic lines and I'm in a 3D view, I might go, oh, I don't have a toilet there. And then I go, well, I do have a toilet there, and so you have to have a combination of both.
So the reason we're doing it that way is to save processing space so that you don't model a 3D object and then Revit has to do the math on that 3D object every time it repaints.
Correct.
But now it's doing the math on the resets of lines.
Correct.
It's still faster to do it 2D.
Correct. It's faster to do it this way, and here's why. What's a toilet made of when you have to model it? I mean, it sweeps and revolves and extrusions and voids. I've seen some that were made, they're made and then it's a void that voids out the bowl itself. And you take that toilet, you put it in a unit, you have a 150 unit IL building. Now you have 150 revolves, 150 voids, that it's got to compute every single time it wants to regenerate that view.
Every time you pan, it's doing the math on.
Correct. Versus, this is just, okay, it's just some lines that it's got to rotate around, and it's faster, it's smaller, it's a smaller file size when you create it that way as well. Because let's be honest, how often are we doing a rendering with a toilet? You know what I mean? We're not doing a view of a bathroom.
Beautiful bathroom stall.
Yeah, exactly. And if that happens, I mean, we can. We have 3D toilets if we have to. And if it happens to where we need to put in a toilet, we can. But what the visualization people are trying to do and the BIM committee are trying to implement is, okay, if we've identified that, hey, we need to render out this view, we'll come back to that specific room and we will put 3D content in that room and then we'll render out that room. And most of the time we're going to probably render it out in Lumion or 3ds Max V-Ray or something like that. So most of that 3D content might even come from that software anyways. So you don't have to necessarily have all 3D content in your Revit file. Because at the end of the day, what are we trying to do? We're trying to tell a contractor how to build this, and we want our documents to be relatively fast and clean. Let me ask you guys, give me an example of something that you would want to manipulate or edit. Might not have parameters, it might not.
I was going to do like a tabletop or a countertop, but then it didn't need like the backsplash piece.
Uh-huh.
How do you do that?
Where it doesn't need the backsplash?
Yeah. So
Okay.
you just need to take it away because there isn't a.
Okay, so let's go back to our container file. And let's say it's this guy right here. And let's first click on that guy and see, do we have any parameters where we can turn off the backsplash? And we do. But I'm going to show you how to do it anyways.
It may not have been the right one.
Correct.
It probably was an older.
And here's the problem, and that is the problem. I mean, I'll get into files where I'm like, oh crap, this one doesn't have the backsplash parameter. So you know what I do? I'll come into the container file, I'll grab the right one, I'll bring it into that project, and I'll put it in its place, and then I have it. That to me sometimes is quicker than me having to edit the one that's there to be able to turn off or on or something. Because here's the thing, and it's been my experience, the second that you delete it, so I edit the family, I delete that backsplash, I put it back in there, the next day someone will come back and go, where's your backsplash?
Yes.
And then you have to rebuild that backsplash. So why not just grab the one that we do have the parameter built into it where we can turn it off?
Is if they were created differently and you insert it and you override it and now all of them are rotated 90 degrees, then you've got to go track it through your entire model.
Yep, there's
Relocate them and replace them.
that is a good point.
If you have to, it's probably better to do it the way you're about to show us.
Correct. Because that's actually a really good point. I had to recently create this wall mount toilet for a project that we're doing for the government, for the VA, because they wanted wall mount. And I had this floor mount flush valve that was everywhere. But this particular one, when I brought it in, it was moved and slightly forward where it was created in the family. And I think this happened to Scott once with his windows, where we went to replace, we created the family, he selected his window, went to select all the new windows, and they all went bloop and shifted over. And it was because of where they were created in the family editor. So that's another thing that we're trying to iron out the wrinkles, because what we're trying to do is as we create new families, we want to start from the same kind of start point. Where that is sometimes, where to find it is you export that file to a CAD file and find where 0, 0 is. Measure that distance from 0, 0 back to a corner known point, and then go back to your family and move that to the right spot. Sounds like an antiquated way to find where the origin is, but what I found is if you have a family that works, open that family. So the case in point, what I did here is I opened this family, I edited it, and this wall mount family, what it didn't have was it didn't have the clearance stuff built into it. And what I discovered was, and let me close some windows here and see where we're at. What I discovered is this guy was actually like centered somewhere in here. And then when I brought that toilet in, all the floor mounted toilets that I had in there, which is probably a good 50 of them, all wanted to shift over, and it wanted to delete all my equal spacing dimensions that I had from my partitions. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I don't have time for this. So I went in here, I took this content, and I just copy pasted it off to the side in this file, and then I put my toilet into this position from this family, and I did a save as from the family name, and then I reloaded this family into my project. Now, when I swapped out my my families, did I have some dimensions that became unreferenced? Yeah, but at least I didn't have to go to 50 toilets and reposition them all back in the same spot. That to me was a little more time saver than having to go back and reposition all those particular toilets. Okay. Let's see. Oh, we were going to talk about the different views. So we're going to look at placement side of this particular toilet and double click on it. So there's my floor mounted placement side, and then we're going to go to the right side, and there's my right side. And it's basically the same thing that you see in this 3D view. It's just now you're seeing all of these. Here's the important thing. These lines are model lines, so they can be seen in every view. All right. Inside of a family editor, there's what's called a visibility settings that you can see over here in the properties and up here at the top. Okay. And when you click on that, you'll notice that I've now allocated this particular line only to show in the left and right view. Okay. If the front and back is turned on and the plan view is turned on, when I go back to my project environment, you'll see that line, you'll be in this elevation, this front view, and you'll see a line that's coming from here all the way down the middle, and it looks like this just mid center line down, and you're like, what the heck is that? It's because probably there is some model lines that aren't allocated to the right view. So you got to keep that in mind.
So right now, the plan view is showing in elevation and doesn't need to be?
Well,
right? Is that what that is?
This guy is showing in elevation. Yeah, those are all the plans. And how come I'm not seeing the... Oh, is that being masked? Yeah, there's all my... I bet you it's being masked. Yeah, it's being masked right now.
You're not really going to see that bottom one.
Well, you're not going to see it because it'll be on the floor, but there is a tool inside, and this is relatively new. I want to say in the last 2 versions, but there's a preview visibility function at the bottom in the family editor that allows you to turn it on. And when you turn it on, it's supposed to turn off. And it did, with the exception of these guys, which are symbolic lines anyways. That's probably why, but they still shouldn't be showing in elevation. It's interesting. But the purpose of that is when you turn that on, it's supposed to give you a view of how that looks in that particular view in the project environment. And then you can turn it back on. It's represented by this yellow box around it, and it gives you the visibility preview of it. I'll have to check this particular family and see if these are, I don't think those are showing up in my project environment. Actually, let's reload this guy into my project. Okay. Let's place him there. Let's do just a quick section. A little section. And then we'll go to that view, and I'm just going to turn off my... Okay, and normal. And let's hide this guy. Let's hide this guy. It is showing. So that needs to be fixed. Thanks for pointing that out. So we need to fix that. But most people probably never saw it because there's a floor line that represents there, and it just,
So it's not a big deal.
so you don't really ever see it. But yeah, that's something that should be fixed. Back to our backsplash. Sorry, we got sidetracked. So let's go back to the backsplash. And did I turn it off right here? I'm going to close some of these other ones. Sorry, guys. No. Turn it off. Placement side. No. No. And no. Okay, so let's edit this family and let's look at it in 3D. So let's say you didn't want the backsplash. Is that what you?
Yeah, no backsplash.
Like it's an island.
So because I don't want to teach you wrong, what I want you to do is go to your container file, get the right countertop, and bring that into your project. And then in there, you'll be able to select that particular object and
then just turn them off.
and turn off the backsplash, and it's gone.
The one I was working in for some reason, I don't think it had, I mean, maybe I just didn't see it. But
There's multiple ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's possible that it came, it didn't come from this particular file, and it wasn't, you weren't able to use it. But the point is this particular one, you have, backsplash only, you have backsplash in the left side, you can turn on and off, backsplash on the right side, you can turn on and off, and then you have backsplash in all sides that you can turn on and off. So if you have it stuck in a little nook or something like that, it gives you the backsplash. Now, what this family should also have built into it is, so this one is, its width is an instance parameter, so you can stretch it, be unique to where it needs to be positioned. But within the actual environment, there should be a backsplash height that you can change to, I need this to be 8 inches. And when I say okay, it should change that whole backsplash to that particular height. Does that sound good?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Give me another example. I need
Cabinet.
cabinet.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I'm going to do base cabinet first, and then we'll get to
Yeah,
yours.
since we are in these element, we can have backsplash with different heights.
So,
Yeah, because now when you
yes, correct. That was a type. That was a type parameter. And if it is that we need to switch that to an instance parameter, I just showed you how to do it. If our 80% rule means that 80% of the time we're changing that backsplash to be a different height all the time, every time we get into it, then we'll change it in here. But typically what I see is, we need all those backsplashes to be, instead of 2 inches, we need them to be 4 inches or 6 inches. And the type parameter allows you to change them all globally instead of selecting all of them or right-clicking and saying select similar and trying to change them all. I mean, it can be done either way, but the type parameter is the easier way to do it globally.
yes, it's
So-
an exercise.
Correct. But you do have the ability, if you needed to go in and edit and change yours to be an instance parameter, and then you would have to change them at every placed instance. All right, so upper cabinet, lower cabinet, what do you want to know?
So make it shorter and then put a shelf and there.
And let's do this. Let's take this. Let's move it over. Like that. And we'll take this 18-inch. We'll copy him over. From there to there. Oh, got to get rid of that crown on the side and valance pull side. Oh, we want the crown on the top. Crown front. There we go. But we want the valance on the bottom. 3-side valance front. There we go. So now we have both of those. All right, so what you're saying is we want this guy to be shorter. So let's edit type. Let's make a new, duplicate the type, and let's say we want this guy to be, instead of 30 inches high, we're going to make him 15 inches high. 15. Say okay.
2 off
Did I leave the 2 on there?
on the back.
Oh, gotcha. Well,
Doesn't matter.
yeah, it doesn't matter for this purpose. Then we're going to come to the height, and we're going to change this to 15 inches. We're going to say okay. It'll probably drop down on us. Nope, moved up on us. I accidentally moved it. There we go. So now I have an 18-inch wide space, but I don't have necessarily a shelf there. Okay, you have one of two options. You can either come in here and edit this particular family to add a shelf, or you could now go to component, architecture, model in place. You want it to be a casework. This is an in-place family now that I'm creating. I'm going to call it shelf at microwave. Sorry, I don't type very fast or well. Say okay. And you could start modeling in this place. But here's the point of modeling. Right now, do you know where you're modeling in 3D space? You don't. You need to define that. And that's where you have to set your reference plane. And when you set it, it's going to ask you, hey, do you want to pick a plane? Okay, let's try pick a plane. Let's see if we can pick this wall. All right, let's pick that wall. Now let's take and let's go extrusion. Let's say we want this to be, right at the valance, or actually right above the valance. Let's say right there. We want it to be, 3/4 inches. Oops. 0.75 inches. Like that. Right now it wants to make it 1 foot deep. Okay. It's starting at your reference plane and going into, so you might have to change this to be, I want it to be end at 0 and start at 1 foot, and I might be doing this backwards, but that's why you have to finish and then finish model. Now let's go back to our 3D view and see what happened here. Let's zoom in here. There you go.
But for this case, is that either just use that shelf in the family and set it, like, if you turn it off, then I don't have to draw it every single time when it pops out.
Correct. If I would ask the question of, will I have this same family that I need 50 times in my model? If I do, edit the family, do a save as, edit the family to have an open shelf below it, and then it will be easily 50 times. But if it's only once, you saw how quickly I was able just to do that one time, and now I'm done. I don't have to do anything else.
It doesn't have a balance under it though.
Doesn't have a
Mary Lou,
balance.
please
You
call
are correct.
Extension 10. Mary Lou, please call extension 10.
That'll be recorded. So, but we're out of time for today. But you can see the complexity of how many rabbit holes you can go with family and editing families. My only recommendation is have some sort of idea or plan as to what you need it for. And what I mean by that is, okay, will it be used more than once? If it's going to be used more than once, you're probably better off editing the family in the editing environment, because if you're using it more than once, you're probably going to use it maybe 10 or 20 times, and you don't want to have to create that shelf 10 or 20 times and, now I got to create a valance for it 10 or 20 times. So ask yourself these simple questions, and it will help you in the long run as far as, now I can manipulate this family at one place, and it will cover myself the other 50 places that I've placed it. Ask yourself, can it be an instance parameter or a type parameter if you need to create those parameters? And like I said, at the next session when we do the more of the advanced stuff, I'll show you how to basically create one from scratch and apply those parameters, create the parameters. You got a little glimpse of creating some parameters today, or switching them from type to instance and stuff like that. I always ask, what am I missing?
Shared parameters. I'm sure that's advanced.
It is advanced. So a shared parameter is a parameter that you create that your project environment has no clue it even exists. So you've created a parameter inside your family, but your project environment goes, I don't know what that is. And a lot of times when you click on it, it'll have a little question mark. It doesn't know, and you have to have what's called a shared parameter. Is a text file that each project has, and when you create a shared parameter, it talks to the text file and says, hey, I got this parameter, it's going to be associated to my doors, and it's going to be a parameter that tells the door schedule, hey, this is a single or a pair of doors. And then in your project environment, you have to load that same shared parameter so that your schedule can recognize, hey, that family is telling the schedule that, hey, this is a 3070 single door, and this is a 3070 pair of doors. Big difference. Contractor needs to know, because he's ordering obviously two doors instead of and door hardware and stuff like that. So we'll get into shared parameters when we get into the next environment as well. Any questions?
The backsplash thing, actually, I do need the one is like you have this side against the wall, you need a backsplash.
Uh-huh.
When you turn, it becomes island, then you don't want the backsplash.
So you need it where the left or right side is on, but the back, the other two aren't.
The 90-degree ones,
The L shape.
the L shape.
This L-shaped one,
So you have one side
backsplash
against the wall.
left and backsplash right.
Maybe not.
And then
So
goes to the
it's-
back,
it's
but
this,
that's
but
a
you-
peninsula.
I need just one.
You need one side that's a peninsula.
Yeah. And the thing.
So
backsplash-
kind of like this one, but without the column.
Right.
Yeah.
Got
And
it.
then probably the width is different. The one against the wall could be just normal countertop width, but when it turns becomes island.
It needs to be deeper.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So we need an L shape that gives you multiple functions. To leg width might be different, leg length might be different. Full ability to turn on all your backsplashes on and off. So maybe that's a good one that we can create at the next session, and maybe the base cabinet one too. We can do both, and create that.